Hello, my name is Debbie Colbert, and I did my oral presentation on racism and how it impacts communities. Racism is defined as a prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against someone of a different race based on the belief that one's own race is superior. The notion of superiority is what started racism in America, particularly against the Black community. American racism dates back to slavery times that started in the 1600s. Racism is a form of oppression that limits people from reaching their full potential and not having access to equal rights and opportunities as the white race. Racism also leads to anger, hatred, and division. It's also the main reason for education disparities, poverty, and violence. Risk factors that are associated with racism are low socioeconomic statuses. Families become oppressed because of lack of education, access to good paying jobs, and poverty. Criminal activity, people resort to criminal activity because they don't have the financial means to support their families. Um, the breakdown of the family structure, parents are incarcerated, children are put in the foster care system, mental health issues, and medical issues. And that is as a result of stress and not having access to healthcare or good healthcare. And so, as you can see, it kind of is a trickle down effect. I also included some other slides that I found online about risk factors that are associated with racism. Racism in America began in the 1600s. However, the slave trade became legal in 1619. Um, that is when I believe, well, they passed the law, they made it legal. So when you legalize something, I believe that is when the people say, okay, well, it's legal now, so this is right. And so I think that really solidified racism. When they made the slave trade legal in 1619, they essentially said, this is okay. And so as a result of that, it just became a normal and acceptable way of life. And slavery was around for 1400, I'm sorry, for 400 years. So it was a very long time that um, that they were slaves. So men and women from Africa were brought to America and sold to white slave owners. This was the beginning of the demise of the Black family because children were ripped away from their mothers and fathers. They were put on a boat and sent to America. Meanwhile, their children were left in Africa. During slavery time, Black people weren't allowed to get an education. They couldn't learn how to read or write. Some didn't even know how to spell or write their own names. They were beaten, they were in prison if they didn't follow a command. They had no rights and no freedom. They were completely oppressed. And that was the beginning of the oppression on the Black community. Once slavery was abolished in 1865, there was still racism. So even though the law changed and it said, okay, slavery is no longer acceptable, the mindset, the mentality of racism was still alive and well. And not only that, the country was still greatly divided and it was segregated. White people and Black people weren't allowed to share common ground. White people had their own schools, Black people had their own schools. And as a result, white people still had more resources. They had the financial means, they had money, they had jobs, they had land, they had all of these things that black people didn't have because although slavery had ended, we were years and years and years behind as a community. So while white people were moving on with their lives and moving forward, educating themselves and doing all these great things, Black people were still dealing with the effects of racism and still trying to catch up. And so they're just I put in some laws that were significant to racism. So in 1619, the slave trade became legal. 1865, slavery was abolished under the 13th Amendment. 1954, the Supreme Court banned segregation for public institutions. Then in 1964, the Civil Rights Act superseded all states and local laws requiring segregation to end. One program that I found was through the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. It provides workshops to undo racism. The workshop provides an open forum to discuss racism and how it impacts society. It teaches conflict resolution training, strategic planning, and education. And they also have men and women from around the world share their experiences with racism and offer solutions on how to end it. Another program that I found was the Stand Against Racism campaign. It's from the YMCA, from the YWCA. It raises awareness about racism. The mission of the campaign is to educate, empower, and encourage people to advocate for change. Every year, they organize rallies across the United States to bring attention to the issue of racism and how it affects families and society as a whole. Um, Interventions on a micro level, I believe, is just providing psychoeducation to individuals on many different topics: education, self-love, cultural competency, racial awareness, mental health, advocacy, racial injustice, social injustice, just educating them and empowering them on these topics. On a meso level, I believe that person-centered and environment-centered approach by developing racism prevention programs that challenge racist beliefs and help people gain a new perspective. An example of a prevention program is having children and adults attend a 4 to 6 week program interacting with people from a different race. They have to exchange information with each other about families, marriage, education, their hopes and dreams, etc. The idea is to have them exchange information about common things that extend beyond race so they can see that they have more in common than probably what they think they do. And as a result of that, the hope is that it would ease some of the fears and eliminate the stereotypes that one race may have about the other. On a macro level, policy reform is the most effective intervention on a macro level. On a macro level, new laws need to be made to reverse institutionalized racism. While there are no laws today that are blatantly racist, there are laws and policies in place that have a greater and devastating effect on the Black community than it does on the white community. And so, examples of institutionalized racism are a company has a policy that says no braids, no twists, no cornrows, no dreadlocks. That is something that those are hairstyles that you can't wear while working for this company because they are messy and they are not professional. Well, historically and culturally, braids, twists, locks, those are hairstyles that are from the Black culture and the Black community. And so that those are not hairstyles that you typically see white people wear. So when you create a policy like that, what you do is you are essentially excluding a whole race, despite the fact that they may have the education, the training, all the skills needed to be a great employee, but they don't have the chance because of how their hair is. And in order for them to get a chance, you have to alter your appearance. And so that's like um, a, a black owned business saying, um, we don't hire people that have blonde hair and blue eyes. Well, black people typically are not born with blonde hair and blue eyes. White people are. And so if they have a policy like that, what that is going to do is essentially exclude a vast majority of white people, because white people are the ones that are typically born with blonde hair and blue eyes. So other examples are laws, especially in the when it pertains to criminal laws. There are policies that are made. Um, so crimes, there are policy made for laws that are made for crimes that are typically committed by Black people or Hispanic people. And they will give them like really, really long prison sentences for non-violent crimes. But then when you look at crimes such as blue collar crimes that are typically committed by white people, their I'm sorry, their prison sentences are not as severe and they're not as long. So those are the kinds of policy reform that we need, and that is what we should be doing on a macro level to change policies to ultimately eliminate institutionalized racism. Today, Black families still live in fear that their children will be mistreated or discriminated against because of the color of their skin. While some people may say this is an irrational fear, it is a very real fear for the Black community. Black families suffer from anxiety and PTSD because of the racism that they have experienced at some point in their lives. The Black community is still fighting for equal education rights in 2018. There is a racial disparity in the public school system and higher education system as it pertains to resources. Predominantly white schools receive a better education and receive more um, uh, federal funding for their schools opposed to predominantly black schools. And it's the same thing applies to higher education institutions. Historically, Black colleges and universities are underfunded by the federal government, and they do not receive the same support as um, a regular public university or college that is not considered historically Black. As social workers, it is our job to continue to advocate for equality and to raise awareness and to challenge lawmakers. And so that is exactly what I plan on doing. It is Racism is such a huge deal, and it is destroying our society. And so it is my great hope with open dialogue and people sitting down and putting their anger and their fears and their stereotypes aside and having conversations that we will be able to move forward. I don't think that racism is ever going to completely go away, but I do hope that we get to a place where we can share common ground, where we can be tolerant of each other and our cultures without everyone being so angry. Thank you.